Day 3, Genesis chapter 8, 9, 10, and 11. After the floodwaters receded, the world was silent. Noah stepped out into a changed earth. Same soil, same sky, but nothing was quite the same anymore. The first thing he did was not to build a house or plant a vineyard. He built an altar. That detail is easy to overlook, but it matters. Before productivity, before progress, before ambition, there was gratitude. New beginnings are sustained not by plans alone, but by posture. What we acknowledge first often shapes everything that comes after. Then comes God's promise about humanity. Never again will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood. This is not God giving up on standards. It is God acknowledging reality. God recognizes that human beings are flawed, inconsistent, and deeply imperfect, and yet He chooses mercy. God's faithfulness is not dependent on our perfection. If you are entering this year aware of your weaknesses, your past mistakes, or your unresolved struggles, this verse reminds us that God already knows, and He still commits Himself. God goes further and establishes a covenant. The rainbow becomes a visible reminder of restraint. This is often taught as a children's story, but its adult meaning is profound. God is saying, I choose preservation over punishment. In a world quick to cancel, discard, and destroy, this covenant reveals a God who believes in continuity. The lesson here is restraint. Just because you have the power to tear something down does not mean you should. Sometimes maturity is not shown in what we can do, but in what we choose not to do. As humanity begins again, Genesis quietly introduces tension within Noah's family. A moment of dishonor leads to long-lasting consequences. From this comes the statement, May God extend Japheth's territory. May Japheth live in the tents of Shem. This blessing is not just about land, it is about coexistence. Japheth expands, but he thrives within the wisdom, covering, and spiritual heritage of Shem. Growth without grounding can become dangerous. Expansion without values leads to emptiness. As you pursue growth this year, career growth, financial growth, personal growth, ask yourself, whose tent am I living in? What values are sheltering my success? Then we meet Nimrod, described simply as a mighty hunter before the Lord. He represents ambition, power, and dominance. He is strong, skilled, and influential. But Nimrod's story is tied to the rise of cities that later become symbols of rebellion. Strength is not the same as alignment. You can be gifted, talented, driven, and still moving in the wrong direction. This year, the goal is not just to be mighty, but to be mindful. Not just successful, but submitted. Genesis then tells us that the whole world had one language and a common speech. Unity sounds beautiful, and it is, but unity without humility can be dangerous. The people came together not to honor God, but to make a name for themselves. Their fear was not failure, but obscurity. They wanted to be remembered. They wanted control. They wanted permanence without dependence. And so God says something striking. Come, let us go down and confuse their language. This was not cruelty, it was mercy. God disrupted their plans to protect their future. Sometimes what feels like confusion in our lives is actually divine intervention. Sometimes God allows disruption not to scatter us forever, but to prevent us from building our identity on the wrong foundation. If this year begins with unanswered questions, delays, or unexpected changes, Genesis reminds us that confusion is not always punishment. It can be redirection. God may be saving you from a tower that would have eventually collapsed. In Genesis 11, we read a painful line. Now Sarai was childless because she was not able to conceive. This sentence is heavy. It reminds us that while history is moving, promises are forming, and nations are being shaped, some individuals are still waiting. Sarai's barrenness is not the end of her story, but it is the starting point of her faith journey. God often begins His greatest plans in places that feel empty. Delay does not mean denial. Waiting does not mean forgotten. If you are stepping into a new year carrying disappointment, unanswered prayers, or silent seasons, Sarai's story reminds us that God's timing often lags behind our expectations, but never behind his intentions. Remember these: after disaster comes mercy, after unity comes accountability, after ambition comes dispersion, and after silence comes promise. God is not intimidated by human weakness, nor impressed by human pride. He is patient, intentional, and deeply involved in shaping humanity, both collectively and individually. God is not asking you to be perfect. He is inviting you to be aligned, to build carefully, to grow wisely. Just like after the flood, the earth is still here, which means your beginning is still possible.